Hi guys, so a viewer of the channel was asking recently about INFJs needs and specifically about why it seems to be the case in a lot of particular cases anyway, that INFJs have a tendency to hide their own needs, downplay them or hide them, not talk about them, and still at the same time seem to resent those who don't address them, who don't see them, address them, and so on. You can already notice that this question is asked by someone that is intelligent and has reflected a great deal about INFJs, because it's a very nuanced and layered question that touches some really interesting truth about the INFJ personality, namely the paradox between being reticent to be too proactive in expressing their need of others, essentially, right? I need to depend on you, I need to count or rely on you for this, reach out to others to express this, and at the same time express a certain kind of resentment and frustration with people for not addressing the needs. Clearly paradoxical, and still clearly something that we tend to see in a lot of INFJs. Now, I think there's two possible interpretations here, okay? There is an interpretation that is an INFJ focused interpretation, and this is the one that I'm going to go into in this video because, you know, this is a channel about type and about INFJs for the most part. Also the types, but mostly INFJs, so we want to have INFJ focused interpretations. But there's another interpretation that doesn't really necessarily have to do directly with INFJs. And it needs to be mentioned because if you, whoever you are as a viewer is asking that question about yourself or someone you know, you need to be aware that it might not have to do with the fact that you're an INFJ, either not at all or not directly. And that's basically if you are, it might have to do with your attachment style. You know, this is something that it's kind of becoming a little trendy these days, talking about attachment style, but there is a lot of theory about attachment style. It first emerged in writings of John Bowlby, who's a post-Freudian psychoanalyst, and there's a very rich theory there, distinguishing between, as you might know, secure and insecure attachment. And I'm not going to go into the detail because I want to focus more on the INFJ interpretation. But you could look up what's called insecure attachment and particularly ambivalent or resistant attachment, because what is a hallmark, it seems, or a cornerstone of ambivalent or resistant attachment is a paradoxical way of relating to, well, in childhood caregivers and later on in life, you know, that kind of relationship to the primary caregiver tends to become a blueprint for, you know, that's the theory of attachment essentially. That relationships tend to become basically the DNA of your mode of relationship with other people, attachment relationships, and the resistant/ambivalent style tends to be exactly that, exactly what's described by the questioner. A mix of having difficulty expressing needs, but also being very ambivalent about the response of the other person. So in the case of the primary caretaker, there must be an element of trust that's not completely cemented there, and it tends to manifest in a form of ambivalence towards care being given or not given. Sometimes care is given and the person's angry and rejects it. Sometimes it's not given and the person resents that, and there's a difficulty with expressing need. So it might have this question could be elucidated via the theory of attachment, and particularly the component of the theory of attachment that has to do with insecure attachment of the ambivalent/resistant kind. Okay, so now that we've said this, let's move on to the possible INFJ interpretation. So using a different conceptual scheme, okay? So INFJs and their needs. You see, in a sense, we are still going to be talking about insecure INFJs here, but we're not talking about insecure in the terms of the theory of attachment. We're going to be talking about my typology of the 4 INFJ types. And you know that among the insecure INFJs, you have the solipsist and the compliant, that I also call the adaptive submissive. And the fact of the matter is, It's kind of easy to understand in the case of the adaptive submissive INFJ or the compliant INFJ why they can end up in that situation, because they are so concerned with fitting in that they tend to repress their NI. Now, NI is their primary subjectivity, okay? So, which means that their self-understanding is going to be mostly mediated with NI, which is to say that if they repress their NI, and their SE is also not very developed because it's never very integrated for INFJs. It can be slightly integrated over time and more maturation over the years, but it's never completely integrated. But this INFJ, in a sense, is going to be a bit of a non-self. They're not going to be completely themselves, a false self in if we were to use a Winnicottian term. Now, this INFJ still has needs. They don't quite understand what those are, and they don't want to share them because they think that they're afraid to be themselves. So they don't want to manifest weakness in a sense. But at the same time, this INFJ is still going to be someone who's going to need someone to care because we are all human. And so there will be an interplay between not wanting to share what their needs are and hoping that people will, in fact, register and ask them, be proactive in relation to them. Usually the cost of being compliant or adaptive submissive is that you don't really assert your personality. So, it's a maladaptive mode of being leading to people actually not necessarily proactively engaging with you, because people are funny that way, but they tend to have this sixth sense about whether you're being authentic or not. So they're never going to quite know how to engage with you in this authentic manner. And so it's easy to imagine how there could end up being resentment. The major risks in terms of sin of this type, adaptive submission, like authenticity being the kind of matrix, but envy and resentment, of course. You're not being yourself, so that's what you're going to feel. In the case of the solipsist, I think that paradoxically, first of all, there's no paradox in the fact that a solipsist is going to be very controlling over their NI worlds, and that tends to manifest in control over their physical environment. Okay, so they're so concerned about protecting that side of them that they will tend to withdraw, okay, from social reality. So, it then becomes easy to understand why these INFJs don't really talk about their needs. They don't talk about their needs because, talking about your needs is a way of opening up your ego and your ego world to another person, to the world outside. And if you feel like the world outside is dangerous, that's something that you're going to be very reluctant to do. Again, if you express needs, you're opening a window onto the world, or to the world. For the sake of the world, you're opening a window into yourself, into your soul. And solipsistic INFJs are often going to be very reticent to do that. The resentment is going to be different. It's not going to be necessarily a resentment about, they're not addressing my needs. I think it's often going to be more manifested in the sense of, they're not understanding me and they're not appreciating my unique NI worldview. The paradox being that they're not giving themselves the means of operationalizing for people to see their NI worldview. Sometimes they might do that in indirect ways through online articles, online forums, and so on, or publishing something under a pseudonym, whatever it might be. But they usually will be a little bit self-defeating in the sense that they will try to push out their NI worldview, but make it sufficiently inaccessible, either in terms of how to literally access it online or somewhere else, or in terms of the writing, that people won't get it and then they'll be resentful for their unique worldview as they perceive it being unacknowledged. And that's because they think they can skip the bridging of severance, where the life project becomes materialized in external reality. That's a jump that you really have to make, otherwise people are not really going to notice you. And it requires a certain kind of step. It requires making a step that looks a bit like humility, in the sense that, my life project will be unique to me, but there's no guarantee that people are going to think it's brilliant, that it's going to be genius. As long as it's significant to me and I materialize it and open up to other people, then we'll see what happens, So that's more so the kind of solipsistic resentment. It's the resentment regarding need is more is more obvious in the case of adaptive submissive / compliant INFJs. The resentment that solipsists have is usually resentment of like their vision being unacknowledged, with all the paradoxical aspects that has in terms of, are they really doing all that's required for that vision to be acknowledged? So hopefully that was helpful. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video, guys. Don't forget, I've written 2 books on the INFJ where I go into a great amount of depth about how INFJs work, how they function in their minds, in their consciousness, and in the way in which, with their kind of mind and consciousness and functional makeup, they interact with external reality. Okay, so that's the part about INFJ life in the modern world. Remain authentic in the modern world, but still find happiness, purpose, value, and remain yourself. The infinite soul. If you want to be an infinite soul, if you're an INFJ, read this book. Okay, the link is right below. The ecstatic soul is the prequel, and it's about the mind, specifically in deep investigation, the deepest, I think, investigation of the INFJ mind, INFJ consciousness, what it's like to be an INFJ, to have an INFJ mind, and its existential manifestations. It's called A New Look at the INFJ Personality. Link is below as well, and as usual, don't forget, my Patreon page is the lifeblood of the channel. You can ask me questions directly there, you can interact with me and the community there, and you get access to bonus content every 2 weeks, in-depth discussions of topics from my mainstream YouTube or my books. And mostly you support me, you help me keep going, anywhere from $3.50 a month. The link is below. I talk to you next time, guys. Thank you for being so loyal. Can't wait to see you again. Bye-bye.